There are no apologies. Item number 2, confirmation of order of business. We may, but in fact I think we will be taking item 8 before item 7 as we are awaiting Mr Duffy's arrival for that item. Item 3, interests. Again, I remind you, if you have any interests in any item that comes up on the agenda today, please declare it. There is no public forum. There's been no request for such. We have the minutes of the 6th of September meeting on pages 7 to 16. Someone care to move there be a true and correct record? Moved by Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor Dahlberg. No further discussion. I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Carried. I have no written chairman's report, and on reflection, no oral report either. So we'll move now to item number 8. Pages 32 to 37. Who is the presenter? Ms. Barton, would you join the table, please? Nikki, no? Ms. Harrison. Michelle here too, the author?
No, through the chair, I'm happy to discuss this report. So this is the remuneration for directors of council-controlled trading organisations. So this for us, this is the Nelson City Council policy, so it's not the joint policy. This really applies to NELMAC. The policy was due for review and is on a 3-yearly cycle for review. And the only substantive change this review period is really to align the policy with the joint policy around how we set the remuneration level. So we, as you'll be aware, we obtain strategic pay director fee surveys, and previously the policy, and this is covered in 4.4 of the cover report, was set to be around the lower quartile of the data. The proposed amendment to the policy would be that that would be between the lower and median quartile, and that brings it into line with the other CCTOs that council holds. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Are there any questions? We're bringing this into line. It's pretty much a procedural move. There are no questions. I'll call for someone to move the recommendation and the recommendation to council. Do I have a mover? I have Councillor Rutledge and I have Councillor Dahlberg as the seconder. Motion is before us. Is there any discussion of the motion? Councillor Dahlberg, seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'd like to say well done on this, because these directors do work hard out there for us, and it's kind of I know a lot of it's for community work and for the good of it, but it's at least suggested by us moving them from the lower to at least to the medium, which I kind of like. So well done, and I'm supporting this motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie. We will await your presence. I'll put it all in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Some places have penalties for that sort of action. Item number 9, pages 38 to 44, the Forestry Advisory Group minutes. Mr. Levitis, or happy for Mr. Murray to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you. Look, the unconfirmed minutes, and I'd stress they are unconfirmed because we haven't had a forestry group meeting since this meeting was held, are there for noting and receiving. Happy to take questions. They're reasonably comprehensive, as you'll see through the discussion. Yeah, happy to work through any questions that you may have.
So, are there any questions? there are no questions. I'll look for someone to move the receipt of these unconfirmed minutes.
Perhaps I should move that.
You'll move that. Do I have a seconder from someone who perhaps is on that? Maybe Councillor Ackland might like to second it, get his name on the books. You're a member of the group, are you not?
Sure, yeah.
Is there any further discussion before I put it? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So now we are awaiting Mr.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in the interest of moving on, perhaps I can answer any questions that might arise as a result of this report. So, just in terms of introduction, this is a report that's for information purposes only. The Uniquely Nelson and what they do for council, they are not a council-controlled organisation, so the delegations for signing off on anything. Excellent timing, Simon. Come on. Go on.
Is everything in line?
It is. The delegations for consideration of both the MOU and the business plan rest with the Chief Executive, but we've attached those documents to the report. And please note that the MOU that we're looking to sign up for this coming year with Uniquely Nelson and NCC, we have provided some additional inserts really around the city centre and the focus that this council has on the city centre work. So those additional provisions are highlighted in yellow. And we're happy to answer any questions, and Simon is here to speak to the business plan.
Opportunity for questions. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Councillor, through the Chair. Thank you for your report. I noticed that the $140,000 that we put this way comes from the CBD commercial rate. Is that what sort of percentage is that of that rate? Is it all of it, or is it 50% of it?
I might have to seek some assistance from Ms Harrison in terms of responding to that.
So through the chair, it's a very small portion of it. There isn't technically a CBD enhancement rate. It's just that it's part of the CBD differential. So there's a differential that commercial ratepayers in the CBD pay above a general rate, so it's part of that. But it is a very small portion because there's also a whole lot of other things like car parking, you know, hanging baskets, all those other sort of things. So it's actually a small sum. You can't really put it as a percentage.
Thank you. If I may, thank you for that, because obviously that's quite a controversial rate, if I could call it that, and how we spend it's very important. So this is obviously a bit of a key plank in how we're supporting the CBD. And so when I was looking through the outcomes, I sort of sat back and thought to myself, if I'm in the CBD, I want more people and all the rest of it, but I actually want some sales going on. And I wondered if there's any sort of measures happening where, with these events that's going on, where we can sort of look at, well, what was it last year versus what sort of impact did we have through the tills of our people up and down the street, because ultimately that's what they're looking for. And I didn't sort of see any financial KPI, financial measure in terms of output, in terms of increase in retail spend. Is that something that's possible to do, or is that something that's in the background somewhere?
Yeah, it depends on the event. There's certain events that we hold throughout the year, and understanding with Uniquely Nelson, 50% of our work is actually behind the scenes, doing a lot of work with Nelson City Council and the rest with events. There are certain events that are beneficial to the CBD, and there's certain events that are put on throughout the year that we support that to a certain extent aren't beneficial to retail. And a good example of that, two good examples of that would be perhaps the Santa Parade and maybe the All Blacks. It's good for the bigger picture, but it's not necessarily good for retail. So as to your question is, how's that gauged? A lot of it's feedback after event. I do the rounds around town after the event, or a promotion or an activation, and I get the general feel there. Measuring dollar terms, question I asked, were you up in the weekend after an event? Some are, some aren't. So we don't directly measure it. A lot of our work over the last 12 months to 18 months has been online and increasing visitation, therefore increasing expenditure through our 3 different platforms, 2 of them we've developed up in the last 18 months. So there's more and more online. And the engagement from that, we can measure the virtuality, over 450,000 views for Nelson City alone in the last 12 months, which is huge, off Google Maps. So those sort of online is very measurable for us. And a lot of the events that go on throughout the year, I usually do the rounds 2 or 3 days after the event to get a feel, was it beneficial? Thank you.
And if I can just add to that, you may not be aware, but we've recently appointed a city centre program lead within the City Development Unit Council, and one of the pieces of work that position will hold will be collating metrics around patronage, etc., within the city centre and what that looks like, so we can track stuff over time. So that's certainly something we're looking at, and that also links into the metrics that the Nelson Regional Development Agency collates as well.
So I'm hearing that we're getting value for money for our 142,000 plus we're getting some effective outcomes for the CBD. That's your summary on that?
Very much with the online engagement we're doing. We've grown our database by 2,000 in the last 18 months. Our Facebook has quadrupled in 2 years. So there's a lot more communication with both the consumer, which is 8,000 people on the consumer database, and 600 on our CBD stakeholder database, which is the businesses, either retail or non-retail. So there's a lot more engagement with them. To such an extent that the likes of Bridge Street have now formed a Bridge Street Collective and actually working together as a collective group. And that's something I've been in the last 2.5 years I've been here, of getting people to form clusters, start working together, and start showing some leadership within the different parts of the town.
Okay, thank you. So just one final question, if I may. It's just actually around a wee point of clarification. On page 29 of our agenda, I see you in the 2018-2019 calendar. In December 18, we've got some summer events, January 19, but then when I go down to September 19, presumably we've got an All Blacks game. Have we got an All Blacks game? Coming.
That's a misprint. No, that's from, that's for 2018.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh.
If we can get that one across the line, and then if they come back, no, we'll certainly work on that. But no.
There's 2 of them. Thank you. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through to Officer Barton. I'm going to ask you 1 or 2 questions about 4.2 there in your report, and that's to do with the work you're doing in regard to establishing a greater alignment between Nelson Regional Development Agency and Uniquely Nelson. How's that work progressing, and when can we expect a report on that? It would be my first 2 questions, but I have another thought I'd like to share with you or question you about after that.
So through you, Mr Chair, the Nelson Regional Development Agency, Council and Uniquely Nelson have been going around a series of conversations with developers, landlords, retailers, and from that we're distilling some key things that we want to start to activate and work on. So that's the first part of the work stream. Out of that, we will then be able to drive some greater cohesiveness between all 3 entities to actually drive city centre outcomes, which is one of the 4 pillars that this council is asking us to deliver on. In terms of coming back to the committee, I would imagine it won't be before about April next year, so I need to embed the new city centre program lead role, and after that I'll be able to come back to you, so it'll be about April next year that I can report back.
Thank you. I see the 2 roles as completely different, quite different, NRDA and Uniquely Nelson. I really do. I see a clear demarcation between the 2. Do you see the same?
So through you, Mr Chair, there is in terms of the delivery functions, yes, there is a distinction between the 2. NRDA is looking at the greater economic benefit across the region. Uniquely Nelson is working entirely with the retailers component, but the 2 do link in together. So there is a crossover, and what the critical thing is that we need to make sure is we're getting greater synergy across the both, so that we're not working against each other, that we're actually linking in and we're actually aligning work programs together. So that's the key bit.
I just don't, through you, Mr. Chair, I don't want to see the work of the NRDA cluttered by any, greater alignment. And what I mean by that is that I even wonder whether the events strategy and that they're involved in does exactly that. And I'm just wondering whether we should, as part of your considerations over the investigating the options regarding greater alignment, whether that should be a consideration that you think about as well, the future of the events programs. I just don't know whether that sits, do you, with the NRDA?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I haven't considered that in detail at this point, so I can't really answer it honestly, but if you would like me to look at that as part of the reporting back, I can do that.
I would, if through you, I would finish by saying yes, I would, because there is a feeling in the community that perhaps it should stand apart from NRDA, and they're quite well-informed people with that view, so I think that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Ms McDonald.
Thank you. Through the Chair, if I could just add a little bit to that question. I think one of the advantages of having the NRDA involved in the event strategy as they are is that they can leverage off other work that they do, because they do a lot of marketing and they help to market the events more broadly, and they can also, when they have a sort of an economy of scale, do deals with corporate partners, as they have done with Air New Zealand, in order to get some extra support for events. So it's actually a package that reaches quite deeply into their organisation, and the events are useful to them in that way.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, similar vein of questioning, I guess, around the alignment between NRDA and Uniquely Nelson, and not particularly drawn on whether it needs to be closer or not at the moment, but I guess what I am keen to see reflected is starting to really roll out and ramp up the great work that was done through the regional identity. And I'm just wondering what you see Uniquely Nelson's role is in really embedding that and starting to roll out all those visuals and the language that goes alongside it.
Thank you for that. To Chair, our role within our DA and our engagement is almost daily with them currently, especially in the last 3 to 4 months and over winter. Our strategies align as far as we spend most of our funding between the shoulder, winter and coming out of winter. And so there's a lot of cohesion and work with them on a daily basis in and out of each other's offices. With the rollout of the identity, our platforms actually reflect a lot of the work or the hard work they've done. Our newsletter, Nelson Advantage, has the purple on it. We've got their logos. We've changed quite a bit around to reflect the work they've done. And also when we're dealing with our stakeholders, as much as possible, they've also done with their stakeholders to encourage that. And that has been presented to the retailers as far as the look and feel, and to align it as much as possible. So we do incorporate what they've done in the last, as far as the identity, as much as possible with that look and feel.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay.
We share each other's logos on each other's platforms and click-throughs.
And subsequent question is, it obviously costs a lot of money to build and then maintain brand equity. Do you have a view on whether, I guess, even the organisation staying separate and delivering their functions, but still sitting under one overall look and feel as having any merit?
There is a lot of crossover between our roles. I see Uniquely Nelson, just to clarify, as we are very much retail hospitality focused. NRDA is, I see, more outward looking as far as bringing businesses to Nelson, the identity.
Sorry, I'll just clarify a question because I've put you off on the wrong track. I apologise. I'm talking about the extraordinary Nelson Tasman that consumer-facing brand as opposed to the labels on the two organisations. And then you go under with the arts and artisans, the clever businesses, the highly connected, those kind of ideas, as opposed to the individual names of the two organisations.
Well, as much as possible, we have included them, both, especially our two big websites, including them and being aligned with them as they've done with their other, like the likes of Interpeople, their look and feel, their engagement on a newsletter. NRDA have presented themselves with the new look and feel. We invite them to do that, and that's a live website, profiling NRDA and the actual new look and feel. So I feel there is quite a bit of crossover with NRDA. They also represent both Tasman and Nelson. We're just CBD Nelson as such. And it's just, for me, it's a fluid situation with NRDA. It's always ongoing. But the invite or to be involved goes both ways. And it's been a very good, I see, cohesive and integrated between the two of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Final question, Mr. Chair. So just on the branding question then, do you see Uniquely Nelson as having brand value to a external consumer audience, or is that more the name and logo of the organisation?
No, I see Uniquely Nelson fits two markets, a domestic market, our local market, a domestic as in New Zealand, the international market, working with NRDA, whether it be conferences or the cruise market, there's a lot of crossover there. Our Uniquely Nelson brochure going into the conferences, the party packs that arrive, working with them with the cruise market. There is identity Uniquely Nelson fits into the overall, I feel, for the local, domestic and international, and actually complement what NRDA are doing.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might just add that we're currently working on, and this will be reported to Council, the City Centre program, and as part of that there's a comms package that needs to come out around the City Centre and some branding. We're very much focused around the NRDA and their 5 pillars, so we're working with them to actually say that's a broader branding that we need to now roll across. So it is something that I haven't yet discussed further with Simon, but I will be. So I do see that that's a branding that cuts across the whole in terms of the NRDA 5 pillars.
Thank you very much. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for Mr. Duffy. I think we're all pleased to see a focus on the CBD, increased focus, and I think that those additional items in the Memorandum of Understanding are very valid. But a question for you as to what extent the potential of Uniquely Nelson is constrained by current funding levels.
Thank you for that, through the Chair. You're right, there's only me and a few part-timers who come in. I've IT boy for 10 hours a week. I'd like to think that the organisation and our contractors do punch above our weight for what we're doing, especially on the online space. We apply for funding at the beginning of the year. I would like to see more funding for Uniquely Nelson, yes, especially to resource it. We are generating a wee bit more revenue from advertising and bundling of marketing packages with those 3 platforms we've got to try and fill that funding gap. I would like to see, if anything, more resource as far as human resource to take us to a different level.
So what would that human resource, additional human resource do, Stuffy, that currently is being missed? I mean, is it something that there'd be a good cost benefit evident on that, or how would you, have you given any thought to how that would manifest itself as an advantage?
It's an advantage, thank you. Through the Chair, I would, we have thought about this a lot. It would free up a lot of my time. I do everything from banking to admin to minutes to board reports right across. I'd like to think 20% of my work is that and 80% of my work is marketing. If I had to sum up Unique Nelson, my role is relationship building and networking and bringing people together, whether it's a retailer, NRDA, a business from Auckland, whatever. That resource person, I would look at more doing the admin work, which would allow us to, and also with our 2 platforms, with our newsletter, to have someone to take that to a different level, which could generate more revenue for us in the next year or 2. It's an interesting job, it's a challenging role, but to have another person in there, even if it was only for 25, 30 hours a week, I think will make a huge difference to our organisation. And will allow more time to, as this weekend we've got the Nelson Street Hop, that was put together in the last 2 months. It's a good event, it has legs, and we can build on that to make it into a 2-day event for next year. But there's 3 or 4 other initiatives I've had, which on a back burner, I can't roll them out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not a member of this committee, so I appreciate the chance to get the chance to ask a question.
Traditionally very generous, actually.
Jerry, you're a very generous man. Through the chair, it's good to see you, Simon. I've had a couple of retailers approach me just in the last week to express their concerns about the impact of the All Black game on their businesses. And their concern, they told me that the Saturday was a really bad day for them, and they said that they were concerned that the perception was that it was a wonderful success and everyone did well out of it. But for a number of retailers, it actually wasn't helpful. And have you been getting that kind of feedback as well, and what are your thoughts on it?
Through the Chair, thank you, Matt. Very good question and very topical. We do run events through the main street of Nelson probably 2 or 3 times a year that actually aren't beneficial to the retailers. That does happen. There was a lot of feedback after the All Black one, as inclusion of the street. It wasn't a retail market. It wasn't a retail, they're not going to be going, some shops were 20, 30, 50% down. They're not going to be buying shirts, art, and so forth. I looked at that. Also, I did have a few other retailers came up and they understood that the bigger picture for the Nelson region and the All Blacks coming here was bigger than their actual shop itself. It was good for Nelson, it was good for hospitality, it's good for tourism. It's just not an event, it's just not an event that fits into retail. It's not we'll close the street and be beneficial, it just won't be. And they know on the event that they'll be down 20, 30, 40%.
So, right, down, okay, so through the chair, when we take that into account, and then we take into account the extra spending that the event brought to the hospitality scene, how do they even up? Because we've heard a lot of good news stories about the All Blacks visit, but when what's the net? Is there a net gain?
Well, it brought a lot of focus to Nelson, from outside Nelson. It did highlight Nelson, and the grounds were looking good. Hospitality did very well on the day. Food, beverage, hospitality did exceptionally well right across the board. There just wasn't a knock-on effect for retail. The event itself was produced and set up by NRDA with our input. Activating the windows and the best dressed and work with NRDA. I mean, that was 9 months in the making, sitting on that committee. It just wasn't, bottom line is, it was an event that was beneficial to the CBD as far as retail goes.
Right. So just so I'm clear, so you think the spending in hospitality was greater than the loss of money that wasn't spent in retail?
I wouldn't have a figure on that. I just know they did exceptionally well. Whether that balances out or not, the profile for Nelson, simple thing, at half time I got calls from Texas from all people in Auckland going, is that Nelson? Is that your grounds? It looked international.
Yep.
So there's certain knock-on effects for Nelson.
Yep.
And there are events. There's one we're doing Christmas. You think it'd be good for retail. Closing Trafalgar Street down, it's just not beneficial at all.
Okay, another topic, very quickly through the chair. Not that long ago, the Works and Infrastructure Committee decided to not press go on the Church Street redevelopment that had been 2 years in the planning. And we'd already spent, I think, $140,000 on it. And we'd worked with retailers and business owners and landlords in Church Street to get to that point. I've also been approached by retailers and business owners.
Can you get relevance to Mr. Duffy in this region, please?
So I've had a lot of negative reaction to that in terms of how retailers and businesses in the CBD are feeling. What kind of response have you had to that news that Church Street's got shelved?
The response from that is, if we had to prioritise where the money's going to be spent, where will we spend it within the CBD? And the Church Street just went up and up and up. I understand there's also infrastructure as far as the pipes and various things that weren't calculated to begin with. The amount of money being spent in that space, anything to highlight or increase certain parts of the CBD, Uniki Nelson encourages. For us to, I know, that was asked not just by the retailers or hospitality people within that space, but also outside that space, why isn't it going ahead? And you know, what was originally the budget, and went up and up and up. That money at the moment it's on hold. I didn't say it's been cancelled as such, but that's being reviewed, and where money should be spent within the CBD and where our actual priorities are.
Sorry, Chair, I know
Sorry, you've had your go. Okay. I'm going to call on Councillor Dahlberg.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd like to cover off a lot of my questions, but the one I'm interested in was your, down in Christchurch, it's called precincts, and you're calling them clusters. Can you give me a wee bit of an idea? Because at the moment, when we're doing the closing off, or probably assisting the top end of Trafalgar Centre look kind of impressive for 6 months, I'm kind of seeing it like a precinct type of thing now. Can you give me a bit of a rundown on where clusters kind of sounds like we're just, as opposed to a designated area of activity that we could see some, shall I say, leveraging off for the city?
So through you, Mr. Chair, one of the pieces of work that the new position will be looking at is an overall framework for the city. And as part of that, it will be identifying precincts, which will then flow on to, and it'll be in conjunction with Uniquely Nelson and NRDA that we're developing that. It will then flow on to how do we make that land for particular areas and what do they look like. So where's the hospitality cluster? You know, where do we put we might have some student kind of focus areas, we might have some heritage focus areas, and where does that look like? So we are in the process of doing that.
So thanks, Mr. Chair. Just following up on that, because we had that comment, which I asked about, when we did the south, the top end of town closed down, and they were 40% plus increase in their revenue. And other areas may have had unintended consequences. We said we were doing some work on adjusting other people. I'm thinking down this end of town, or this end of precinct, for want of a better word. Are we working on that, and is Uniquely Nelson involved in that?
Yes, we definitely are. Last year was interesting, and there was a knock-on effect for the likes of Upper and Lower Hardy Street and also New Street. I've had several meetings with the Upper Trafalgar Street people in the last 2 months as they head towards November the 8th. Uniquely Nelson, we will support Upper Trafalgar Street, but not as much as we did last year. That time and the effort, or the marketing of the rest of the town, we will focus on New Street, Upper Hardy Street and Lower Hardy Street to, it's funny, you talked about a cluster and a precinct. We start things off as a cluster and it ends up as a precinct, as we've done on different parts of town. There will be a focus on those other hospitality providers in town, and I've met with Upper Trafalgar Street people, made that quite clear to them. They understand that, and they are taking over the role that we played last year. They're taking a lot of that role over as far as marketing, the look and feel, the brand, even the naming of it for this year. I think will be different from last year. But we are working with them about a lot of our time and effort. For Uniquely Nelson, we'll go into other parts of the city.
Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what I really want to follow up.
Good.
That was an important point from earlier in the year when we made a big decision.
Yep, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Barton, page 19, the memorandum of understanding, is that correct? What's in yellow is new?
Through you, Mr Chair, yes, that's correct.
Cool, thank you. And Simon, thank you. I know you work very hard, and there's some amazing events coming up, and I see even when I'm not wanting to look for things coming up on social media, etc. And a lot of work going behind there. And the street hop, unfortunately I'm away that day, but little things like that, or big things like that, I know take a lot of energy, and they keep the spotlight on the city centre. So well done. My questions are, you very much, it's great you engage retailers and stakeholders, and I periodically have a chat with street holders on the street, and you always get grumpy ones and happy ones, and the public get a bit grumpy about the vacant shop spaces, and sometimes that's a bit unfair because that can happen not to do with what you're doing, etc. It's just a cycle of things. But saying that, on that new one, on number 1, he got actively seeking new retail opportunities for the city centre. What is that, and how are you going to get some more shops in? But just a quick clause there, I see some great new shops are opening, so not to dismiss that. Some of those empty shops have got some great brands coming in. But how are you looking at helping get shops into town?
Helping the retailers. We look at there was a lot of full leases this year, especially over the winter, a bit more so than last year. And it's interesting that there has been movement. Barker's moved off Hardy onto Trafalgar. Moochie's moved into town. There's a new floral shop opened. There's a gym going into Bridge Street. So there are things happening, and there's a bit of circulation. And as I said, the retailers, we can talk doom and gloom. If you go down that road, you end up there. But there are some good things, and there are market forces working outside Nelson that do affect Nelson, whether it be online, the chains moving, changing their focus. As far as Unique Nelson encouraging people to do business in town, in Nelson City, once again it's working with NRDA to see who they're talking to outside of Nelson and what we can do to help. A lot of those retail spaces, it's a bit of a sideline, but we're looking at putting a program in for the summer of those shops that are empty, putting in lunchtime music sessions, whether it be a little string quartet within an empty shop, people can go and have lunch and listen to something. Putting a shop alongside. Morrison Square's been very good at this, of transforming empty space. As we put a recommendation to them, there was an empty shop next to a eatery, turn that empty shop into a place where you can sit down and eat your food. So it's getting rid of those empty spaces, and it actually looks as though it's part of that restaurant, even though it's not. So it's changing perception. That's not all doom and gloom. And when certain organisations like the Oyster Group come down from Auckland and they are trying to fill their spaces, we have conversations with them. I meet with CFIS and Tinline probably every 6 to 7 weeks about their movements and what they're doing in town and what's been proposed for here. So it's a wee bit behind the scenes. I'm doing as much as I can within our mandate for Uniquely Nelson to support retail.
Couple more questions there. I know, like saying you engage well. But sometimes I get disappointed when I speak to some retailers and they say to me, oh, I know you council should be doing this, or why is this happening on Trafalgar Street, it's not helping us. And I say, well, Uniquely Nelson is a lot to do, but Uniquely Nelson's your voice for that, and you need to engage them, tell them what you're happy or not happy with, and often they say, oh no, I don't. What I'm saying is, do you think you are covering the people, not just the same core group, but the people from the coffee carts to the retail shops on the street that may have moans, do you think you're covering those people? Often that's up to them to come to you as well.
Yes, very true. I think we have in the last 18 months to 2 years changed the perception of Uniquely Nelson in the brand. Okay. That we are engaging, especially online, and I probably do about 2 or 3 kilometres a day around town. A good example is Bridge Street. In the last 2 months, we've put together a cluster group at the moment, which will then lead into setting up some form of precinct, which we've done in Niall Street, East and West, and we've set off a cluster group and then end up with, at that particular, as it becoming a destination. So Bridge Street have taken the lead, and we're setting up this Bridge Street, and if I could get the rest of town to do what they're doing, my job would be a lot easier. But it's them working collectively, and the brand coming out is Experience Bridge Street, and they want to activate Bridge Street for Christmas.
My feedback is that keep very approachable, because I get concerned that some, probably from their own fault, partly, that they may not perceive there's a big organisation doing all these big things and not approachable. So I'll just keep it up. I know you do what you can on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Have you got another question?
Last quick question. The website. I know you need that presence. I always got concerned previously, and that may be taking a lot of your energy or a lot of so forth, do you think that's justified to keep that momentum on the website presence? I know we had one platform that's changed to another platform. There's some good stuff.
Yeah, okay, with the online, we have 3 platforms. Facebook, the newsletter, and our old Unique Nelson, which is basically a glorified Yellow Pages, which now has the VR built into it, the virtual reality. The newsletter for us is our front door to the mother of all websites, which is that VR. We are now having retailers come to us. I had 2 this morning, IT companies. He said, how do we get involved in Unique Nelson? A year ago, that didn't happen. They're now looking at what we're doing online, especially with the newsletter, which feeds into our Unique Nelson website. That's all transferable into Facebook. Facebook feeds into our website. Website feeds into our newsletter and vice versa. It all links. So we're finding we are generating more revenue by bundling and marketing those marketing initiatives together for the retailer. Ciderfest, we used to promote them for nothing. We're now charging X amount of dollars for them to actually promote on it, and they're coming to us, how can we get involved? So that's changing to give us more revenue, to then we would put on more events, like the Hop Street, staffing, other resources.
Very good. And I see your governance team there are some good people, good down-to-earth, grounded people on your governance team, so well done.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you, more to Officer McDonald, really, if you don't mind. I need to pick up on Mr Peters' questioning of our presenter today around the human resource aspect of it, because I'm clearly of the view, through you, Mr Chair, to Officer McDonald, that we set aside 70,000 to add to the funds already in the CBD account to promote our CBD, and part of that 70,000 was for a part-time further resource for Uniquely Nelson. Is that correct? Could you expand on that for me, please?
Through the Chair, it's certainly that was discussed in the long-term plan, but Council did not ultimately decide to make any of that money directed towards a part-time or other staffing for Uniquely Nelson. So that 70,000 was put in there to provide some operational funding to balance the capital funding that's available in the CBD Enhancement Fund. And it was noted in the discussion that if there was a particular project that needed operational funding that Uniquely Nelson was promoting, then that is one potential use of that money. But the 70,000 OPEX was not directed to a particular role. It is there to be used as part of the CBD Enhancement Fund.
Thank you, Mr McDonald. You have your answer?
I have another question related to Ross.
All right.
Yes. You happy about that?
Yeah.
You've let others run.
Proceed.
Right. Officer McDonald, I was clearly of the view that Uniquely Nelson could apply to that fund and obtain some part-time human resource from that 70,000. I was promoting that at the time of the long-term plan, and I was clearly of the view that that was their opportunity. They could go to the CBD Enhancement Fund and use part of that 70,000 to support another half a person.
Through the Chair, yes, I certainly recollect you promoting that. That was not the ultimate decision. I can send you the minutes from the discussion if you'd like.
Thank you.
I totally
I'm sorry, that is the position. Yeah. The decision was made by Council. We can't change it today, so carrying on is irrelevant.
I totally understand that, Mr Chair, but I'm seeking answers, and I'm entitled to get them.
Councillor Ackland, you have the floor.
No, I've got a question. I've got 3 questions, but through you, to you, Simon. It strikes me, I mean, you're in a unique position as well, in the sense that you've got competing interests. You see what I did there? You've got competing interests with potentially competing retailers, and you're trying to create shared goals, even though they're competing interests on a small basis, but then also you've got competing interests with retail centres and other areas of the region, particularly Richmond, competing with Nelson. And what I'm hearing from you today is that your strategic objective, or one of your guiding principles, is to create these clusters to then lead on to precincts and achieve kind of grassroots up sort of shared interest of areas. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, what I have, yes it is. It's, instead of trying to deal with the whole problem, is breaking it down and getting the likes of Bridge Street, Experience Bridge Street to lead the charge.
Yeah.
What they plan for Christmas will make the others, I think, sit up and look at like, why aren't we doing that? So it's slowly stepping it up and them come together as a collective group to lead the charge for their part of town. But it's certainly not long term, is to divide the town up. So you've got suburb here, or you've got precinct here, precinct there. But it's them working collectively and to learn off each other. I sat in those first couple of meetings with the Experience Bridge Street group, and I don't know, I just felt sort of there was fire in the belly, especially from them, and it was contagious. So that idea of bringing them together as a collective group and then the roll-on effect for the rest of the city, and to be honest with you, it makes Unique Nelson's job a lot easier. We support it, I put some money towards it to help them with their logo and bits and pieces, but they're the ones leading the charge.
I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, because human nature, it seems to me, from a lay perspective, that human nature might be to try and impose distance between you and a competitor. But it seems like the reverse is actually true and beneficial, is to bring parties closer for mutual benefit in areas, and it can be done by organically like that, people coming together and leading the charge, or in a more forced fashion like in Christchurch when they're directly creating new precincts for different sort of zones of recreation or eating or haircuts or whatever it is, justice. But what I'm leading on to really is the issue that happened with Church Street, because it seems to... what happens then when council doesn't support the grassroots level of that hub? I mean, is there a feeling of disconnecting that occurs? Because I also note in your summary, one of the key principles or key objectives is to create upgrades of infrastructure. And I need to hear back, I suppose, from the community directly through whether or not it's through Uniquely Nelson as an advocate for those retailers, what effect that has when council doesn't partner with those grassroots leadership in our community.
Councillor Ackland, I think that question has already been put and addressed, but I'll allow Mr Simon to answer, because that's exactly what Councillor Laurie asked earlier, in a much shorter form.
Oh, we could have saved a minute.
Mr Duffy, do you want to respond again?
Yeah, it's...
Church Street?
Yeah, such a chair we've got today, Mr Duffy, isn't it?
Okay. Like I said earlier, when Councillor Laurie asked the question, it's any initiative that the council puts forward to support the CBD, Unique Nelson will support. If we have a point of view, and I think with I was saying earlier, our point of view where the funding, the budget just went up and up and up. I look at that as that amount of money, I think it was over $1 million. Where could that money, for me, if I had to make up a list for the CBD, where would you spend that money elsewhere? I don't know if I'd be spending it within Church Street. But having said that, there's a considerable amount of that money I believe was under the ground that needed to be fixed anyway. But there are certain initiatives and things that the council puts forward that obviously we do support, and other times I've been verbal on a few things. But as far as Church Street goes, I would, if I had to put it on a wish list, it wouldn't be top of the list at the moment with the amount of money that could be spent elsewhere within the CBD and activating certain parts. Just for the amount of money, and to be honest with it, the size of that street. It's a very short street.
Thank you. Thank you.
Two other questions. One is just generally on lease space and so on. Are you hearing anecdotally, or can you report any feedback on steps taken by private landlords, for instance, to encourage retail growth, lease growth by reducing rents or anything like that? Or what's the general take-home message at the moment on that?
I haven't heard from there's two sorts of people that own property. There's developers and landlords. There are certain developers that do want to push ahead, and there's certain landlords, whether you give them a rate reduction or not, would really make no difference to their business. Yeah. So it's, there's certain landlords and developers which are really approachable in this town, and there's some that we actually struggle with who are doing their own thing. And to me, they work in isolation when we should be. And as Claire's been working on a huddle group for the CBD of landlords and developers, and that is forthcoming.
Thank you.
But once again, it's don't work in isolation, they need to start working together.
Well, I mean, Mr. Chair, I mean, it might be useful to have that conversation with Uniquely Nelson more broadly so we can, I mean, I know it's an ongoing conversation that we have, but it is useful to kind of identify that as...
I've been assured that, that in all of our projects that involve our CBD, our staff carry out a full consultation with Uniquely Nelson. So we are getting that communication.
Oh no, sorry, that's not quite my point. My point was more on incentivising the more reluctant of those parties in the private space through different mechanisms and levers that we can pull to encourage them to be leasing there and upgrading their properties to meet our expectations for the city more generally, or at least by way of incentive. But I'm sure that's being dealt with because I know it's been brought up.
I think it's a good point that we can look at in the future, but it's not something that we can handle today.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I might be able to assist. So one of the things that we very clearly heard when we went out to the retailers was that rentals is one of the levers that they look at. And so we've set up this process, which Simon's alluded to, called a huddle group, which will be meeting in the next few weeks as the kick-off meeting. And part of that conversation will be how do developers and landlords actually incentivise people to come in, and rentals as a part of that conversation. So we're hitting the people that will be dealing with it.
That's good. That's good. That concludes the questions. I've just got a few comments to make. I'm pleased to hear that you're in touch with Mr. Pagent and Cephas. And you haven't commented on the potential benefits to the CBD from the construction of the gondola. Have you thought about that? Have you been in contact with the gondola project team?
Yes, a lot. They will be our guest speaker at our AGM this evening. The new Chief Executive for the Adventure Park Group to present to the concept and the ongoing feasibility study to the retailers and hospitality this evening. We were a week ago, we went up, about 9 of us, up to the top of the hill, did a photo opportunity for the newspapers. So for me, the gondola, to have our own jewel in our own backyard, would be great. Everything's front of house. We don't have anything in our backyard, and it's just not about cycling or mountain biking either. It's about tourism, adventure tourism.
Very good, because some of us believe that it will be a real attraction that could even rival the national park for the number of people that it might attract. Yes. I want to give you the opportunity to again make a little advertisement for your AGM tonight, 5 p.m, isn't it?
It's 5:30. It's a busy night in town tonight. There's about 5 things on.
5:30 at
5:30. Pardon?
Where is it being held?
At the Nelson's School of Music, Nelson, Centre for Musical Arts. It's 5:30. We kick off at 6 o'clock with the AGM. Take about 10 minutes, and then Hemi will actually be speaking for a bit of a presentation. We've actually filmed some of the retailers' hospitality, and there's a video presentation of what they think of the project and their feeling about the CBD and how it will impact the CBD. I'll be honest with you, if I went to any retailer today and said, what about the gondola? And they said, can we build it by 4:30 today and get on with it?
Great. Well, I'm sure there'll be a number of councillors go, but I do have to tell you that we have another AGM at 4 o'clock at the Suter, so provided that doesn't go too long, I'll definitely will get to your AGM.
The one finishes at 5:30, I believe.
I hope so.
Yep.
Right. I would like someone to move the recommendation. This is something that is really just receiving the information, because as you'll have read in the report, the Chief Executive has the delegation to complete this agreement. It's been moved by Councillor Dahlberg. Has it been seconded by anybody? By Councillor Skinner. No further discussion, because I think we had a fair bit of discussion during those questions. I'll put it all in favour and say aye. Against no. Carried. Thank you, Simon. See you tonight. Next item on the agenda is item number 10, exclusion of the public. Moved by Councillor Walker, seconded by Mr. Peters. Sorry, Gail. I'll put the question that's been moved and seconded. All in favour will say aye. Against, no, carried.